Welcome back, another episode. The third episode of Manhunt follows Secretary of War Edwin Stanton's pursuit of John Wilkes Booth as he travels south following President Abraham Lincoln's death. In doing so, Episode 3 sheds additional light on Booth's motivations, as well as the geopolitical milieu in America immediately following the American Civil War. The personalities of the two guys engaged in the cat and mouse game at the center of Manhunt are further given some color in Episode 3. White nationalist Edwin Stanton is shown as Booth's exact antithesis, whereas Booth is portrayed as a self-centered, borderline insane individual. At the conclusion of the episode, Booth's quest comes to an abrupt halt in the woods not far from Virginia due to an unplanned run-in with the Confederate Secret Service. In the meantime, Edwin Stanton advances his case for the possibility that Booth's attempted murder was the product of a Confederate plot rather than the work of a lone gunman. Even though Manhunt's storyline contains several significant deviations from the real-life experiences of John Wilkes Booth, the third episode establishes that a little artistic license is the proper move for producing a more captivating criminal thriller. How completely misguided Anthony Boyle's portrayal of John Wilkes Booth in Manhunt has become. Booth's desire to become the Confederacy's second president is evidence that he genuinely thinks of himself as a hero. The journal he kept during his travels shows how significant he thought he was. He even tells his friend David Herold that after he finds the right publisher in Richmond, his ideas will be required reading in classrooms and libraries. In actuality, Booth was demonized and pursued as a traitor, a coward, and a threat to the U.S. government. The greatest insight into Booth's self-perception and the reasons behind his attempt to assassinate the most well-known figures in U.S. politics is offered in Episode 3. In Manhunt, Samuel Cox, a fictitious Confederate Secret Service agent who views Booth as a hero, encourages Booth's illusions. Booth's desire to travel to Richmond serves to further illustrate his illusion. He is bluntly informed by Samuel Cox that not a single significant Confederate remains in Richmond and that most of it was just destroyed by the Union Army. Even now, Booth appears unfazed, telling Cox and his traveling partner David Herold that he is a symbol in Richmond and nowhere else. Booth dosames himself because he is blind to reason since he is so sure that he would be welcomed as a hero in the South. Dr. Samuel Mudd repaired Booth's injured leg, and Booth and Herold enlisted freeman Oswell Swan to drive them to Samuel Cox's house in Rich Hill. As a well-known supporter of the Confederacy, Cox reluctantly decided to provide sanctuary to Booth when the latter unexpectedly knocked on his door in the middle of the night. As a reclusive agent of the Confederate Secret Service, Samuel Cox is portrayed in Manhunt as having a well-established connection to the secret line, which Booth is pursuing to reach Richmond and beyond, as well as a concealed signal chamber in his basement. Since many Confederate commanders fled to Montreal after the war due to Canada's lack of extradition, Lafayette Baker dispatched James Wallace, the reporter-turned-spy, there to corroborate rumors of a Confederate conspiracy. Given that Surratt was a key organizer of the April 14th activities and would consequently be aware of Booth's ultimate strategy, Wallace confronts Surratt to find out where Booth is. Regretfully, Surratt flees on a ship that is probably headed for Europe, where the Confederacy still has allies, after neither Wallace nor Stanton are able to corner him. Another instance of how Manhunt presents the Secretary of War as a field investigator and enhances the spy thriller aspects of the program is Stanton's visit to Montreal. Because Stanton believes that John Surratt is the only lead to Booth's whereabouts and final destination, he is adamant about finding him. He goes in search of Surratt after discovering from Baker's spy that the man is in Montreal. In the third episode, Stanton meets George Sanders, a man who may have played a role in the Confederate plot to assassinate Lincoln, in person. According to the narrative, Sanders is a businessman whose interests were harmed by the Emancipation Proclamation, which is why he wants Lincoln to be assassinated and the Confederacy to be allowed to flourish. Sanders is said to have even served as the impetus for Booth's murder through Surratt, whom he aggressively shields throughout the episode, and the Confederate Secret Service. With Mary Sims receiving a land grant from the War Department as part of Lincoln's initiative to aid in the integration of freed slaves and former slaves into the Union, Episode 3 closes on a hopeful note. Although Mary Sims may not have experienced such in real life, her narrative is intended to provide some context for recently liberated African Americans during the era following the Civil War. The showrunner of Manhunt, Monica Beletsky, told AP News that she wanted Mary Sims to be a combination of various brave people who came forward to testify against Booth and his conspirators, just like the real Mary Sims did. For more, subscribe.